Cash Paymaster Services may have managed to get an extension of their SASSA contract, but it seems the company is now in trouble. The Constitutional Court judgment forbids the agency from making money out of the deal, and what it implies is that CPS may have to hand back profit made from the social grants contract so far. The profit is estimated to be around 1 billion rand over the past 5 years. However, the court will only know at the end of April whether it can enforce this ruling. And joining us live in studio, Tshepo Khadima, political analyst, Kabelo Siabi, a lawyer, and Sfiso Matlango, resident political analyst for ANN7. And you at home, the lines are always open. Give us a call on 011-542-2186. Good evening to you, gentlemen, and thanks so much for joining us. I do appreciate context, and that's why we rely on your expert analysis on this Business Day story that suggests that CPS may be compelled to pay back 1 billion rand. Before we get all excited, can you give us the background, Mr. Khadima?
Well, we recall that I think in 2013, when the Constitutional Court made the order that it did, which declared the contract invalid, they at the time had not foreseen that the contract would actually go to the full length of its tenure, which is ending at the 31st of March this year, and they had not even foreseen that they would have to extend an invalid contract by 1 year. But last week, I think, when the court made the finding that it did, I don't see how any one of us can read that there is actually any monies that are due. However, one has to also bear in mind that Net1 UEPS is a U.S. company, and it pays its taxes in the United States. And when I was going through the financials of the company over the last 3 years at least, there is no provision of any kind that they have made in their financials. The share price has not responded up or down. So it means that the market and the investors have fully priced the SASSA contract being out of CPS or out of UPS, and any monies that they would make, as I think, as Net1. So effectively, when you look at the company from where it stands, I can see how anyone, because they have not made that provision, and also they have not declared any substantial profits. One has to bear in mind is that with it being a fully owned subsidiary of the U.S. company, that is CPS, effectively, the U.S. company, when you look at their financials, they've been charging for services, which would in turn mean that profits are transferred. I think that even with Commissioner Moyane probably would have been waiting with great anticipation if there was 1 billion rand made, because he would have gotten the due corporate income tax that would have been due. None of that is there. So at the end of the day, you got to remember this. The one who controls the cash flows, controls everything else, and determines whether there is income. So ordinarily, Net1, I'm saying that in 2013, when the court made the order that it made, everything else changed. There is no way they would have ever declared a profit. And I'm saying, and I'm not alleging or impugning their character, but I'm saying when you look at their financials, you don't see that stream of cash flow and income, taxable income from CPS, whereas they were able to use from an invalid contract, generate a whole lot of revenue from other associated services, which were not even in the first place required to have been on a nil basis without either loss or profit.
Yeah, it's not a straightforward one. I mean, what the court declaring that SASSA needs to have access to the financials of CPS, but Tshepo was saying that there are accounting mechanisms where you can sort of disperse money across the subsidiaries without necessarily declaring undue profits on the part of CPS. Just from a legal point of view, Kabelo, what can we even claim this money back from CPS?
Can I first give a little bit better background? This matter starts first with the first case that was brought by Allpay against CPS. Now, CPS had been granted a contract for 5 years in 2012. And on the 17th of April 2014, the Constitutional Court declared that 5-year contract to be invalid. Now, during the Allpay case, Allpay had contended that if the tendering process or the procurement process had been done correctly and they had received the contract, they would have saved SASSA 926 million rands, meaning that their pricing was 926 million rands better than CPS. And that is where this story of the 1 billion rands comes from. But what the Constitutional Court ordered last week on the 17th of March was simply that CPS must produce an audited statement. That statement must set out the expenses that CPS has incurred in running the contract, the income that it has received over the past 5 years, as well as what profit it has made over the past 5 years. And that is as far as the Constitutional Court ordered. It simply said that those audited financial statements must be filed on or before the 30th of April. And SASSA then in turn has been charged with verifying the data that CPS produces in the audited statements. And that is where the matter lies.
Well, it still goes to the fact that CPS had been, benefiting not only from what seems to be protection, favoritism when it comes to the SASSA grants, over and above the fact that it's very difficult now to prove whether they unduly profited or not. What the Constitutional Court had said as well is that going forward, they shouldn't profit from this extension of an invalid contract in a sense. So is this now just something hanging in the cloud, Sfiso, that they might be liable for 1 billion rand payback?
I think it's a case of African people saying, let's sort out our issues at home. Or if you're involved in a fight in the street and I don't ask why are you beating up my sister, I join the fight, we gang up on the enemy. And then I say, Cindy, I'll sort you out at home. In the first place, the questionable factor is, why did CPS have to get this contract in light of our BEE framework? And surely there are many South African organizations and companies who could have benefited from this. Why didn't we build up muscle and emancipate our postal services or the state bank that we've been talking about for so long? But in fact, a foreign company comes in, it benefits. We perhaps should not say unduly benefits, although that is the prediction and the exception of the courts. And I think what the Constitutional Court has come up with is to say, let CPS continue so we don't have a crisis in this country. This was just avoidance therapy for the court to say, well, your deal is in fact illegal. We have deemed you unfit long ago, in 2014 for that matter. But just carry on and do it so that at the 1st of April, South Africa doesn't ban, because that is what would have happened essentially. So I think it was just a matter of allowing CPS to just continue. But in this year that has been awarded, the South African Post Office would have to be emancipated and build muscle so that it can take over the SASSA payouts. But notwithstanding that, a deficit has already happened. And should they have benefited from this time when the court had declared that they were unfit or unready to take over the SASSA payouts, then in that case, they should say, this is how much you want to pay back to South African Treasury. It shouldn't even be government saying to CPS, this is how much we're demanding for you to say. Why come on South African soil, benefit so much? The courts in South Africa find that you shouldn't do that, but you continue to rake in the billions that are not even shared and spread among South Africans.
Yeah, but can it be proven, though, that this was not just operational expenses and paying for infrastructure, staff, etc., that CPS has accumulated piles of cash and unduly profited from the SASSA contract?
Very difficult to do that. We have to bear in mind that last week when the CPS lawyer was in court, he argued, and it would appear that he argued so successfully because he pleaded financial hardship. It's for that reason that the court said in the event that, remember, the contract is extended, but it's effectively not extended. The important finding was to say CPS is a quasi-organ of state, therefore you've got a constitutional obligation to continue rendering the service. And in the event that the cost of rendering the service will put them into further financial hardship, hence the provision that they need to approach National Treasury to have it determine whether or not, or assess if the increment that they would be seeking would entail be justified not to profit, but to at least be able to continue rendering that service, as now with their status as a quasi organ of state that has got a constitutional obligation. But already they've pleaded financial hardship. When you look at their financials, there is, I just don't see how anybody can say that they will get R1 billion. Even in that case, you still have to go and litigate. And I'm not so sure as to the course of action that will be followed, how successful will it be, more so taking into account that the ones that have prepared the books have already signed them off on the basis that there isn't that R1 billion profit. So it's going to be a difficult one. I think for us as a nation and for us as a country, this has been a bitter pill to swallow. It's the lesson of life. If you look at their financials, they've got a company called UEPS Biometrics, which is effectively supplying the biometric technology to CPS. And that company is charging quite a handsome fee for providing that technology, and has that CPS itself really would not have been a cash cow or a profit generator for Net1, which is the New York company. And I emphasize, if indeed the risk was there that there's R1 billion on the line, you would have seen it in their share price responding downward. The share price has pretty much remained the same because all of that has been priced in, or the potential claim has been priced into the share price.
Yeah, so we can't argue that there should be consequences for profiteering, and duly so. As Tsepo was saying, it's in the nature of the business, and that it can't obviously be proven that there is additional cash hanging around, or rather accumulated from CPS.
Look, the reason why the initial contract was declared invalid, part of the problem was that the pricing was not competitive, because when the tender was issued, there were certain defects that made the pricing to be uncompetitive. And if I can take it to that scenario, if one was able to show that the pricing of CPS was beyond what was legitimately payable in terms of the tender, one could conceivably go to court and litigate on a basis of undue enrichment for the refunding of the extra money that CPS made from this invalid contract. And that is the only basis on which one can claim some of the money back.
Okay, it does seem like the horse is bolted on this one, but thanks indeed, gentlemen, for your time. See so much.